Chapter 19. This would be the story of the year, the kind of exclusive that would keep the story in the nation's consciousness and possibly take his career up a notch. Out of all his colleagues, he had been the first to catch wind of it. Even more fortuitous was spotting Emmanuel King seated in the far corner of the café. He was buried in a stack of legal briefs, a cup of something steamed beside him, and a half-eaten pastry on the plate. The meeting with his colleague could wait. This opportunity was too good to pass up. Tim Taylor hesitated momentarily, debating whether to take a quick, surreptitious photo to set the stage for his article. It would certainly add to the intrigue, but he couldn't risk blowing his chance to pry meaningful details out of Emmanuel. Tim was in his late 40s. His ruddy complexion betrayed years of stress, late nights, and the creeping frustration of a career that had never quite reached its potential. Once hailed as a rising star in investigative journalism, he had quickly alienated colleagues and superiors with his abrasive nature. He watched with increasing resentment as younger, slicker reporters were given the breaks he felt he deserved. Opportunities he had worked for slipped through his fingers while others climbed the ranks. Frustrated and sidelined, Tim had come to see journalism not as a pursuit of truth, but as warfare. Slightly overweight, he carried himself with the forced confidence of a man who probably knew his best days might already be behind him. In a crisp white shirt and a pair of jeans, he adjusted his glasses and strode towards Emmanuel. Emmanuel King? He knew he was bordering on intrusion. Emmanuel didn't look up. "And you are?" Emmanuel asked coolly, recognizing the distinct desperation of a journalist on a hunt. "Tim Taylor, editor at the Daily Morning Standard," he introduced himself, stretching out a hand that was pointedly ignored. "What can I do for you?" Emmanuel remained focused on the legal brief before him. Tim pressed, undeterred. "How is your client coping with the pressure of her upcoming trial?" No comment. "Is she remorseful for Edward's death?" No comment. Tim's jaw tightened. He wasn't about to let this slip through his fingers. He needed an angle, a chink in Emmanuel's composure. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if they were co-conspirators in some great revolution. "Is it true you have a reputation for putting killers back on the streets? What does that do for the rest of us?" "Innocent until proven guilty," Emmanuel replied, his eyes still fixed on the document in front of him. Encouraged by the sliver of engagement, Tim wanted to press further, but he was interrupted by a waiter. "Everything all right, sir?" he asked Emmanuel politely. Emmanuel nodded. Tim seized the moment. "Coffee for me, milk, no sugar, and a croissant, please." The waiter hesitated, cast a quick glance at Emmanuel, then nodded and retreated. Tim took a seat opposite Emmanuel and returned his focus to his target. "Look, mate," he said, irritation creeping into his voice. "If you won't talk to me, someone else will. The public wants answers. Why did she do it? She doesn't even deny killing him, but what was the motive?" Emmanuel lifted his eyes briefly, met Tim's gaze with an unreadable expression, then glanced away. Tim saw an opening and pounced. "Would you care to set the record straight? There are theories, you know, that she was a scorned woman, that she'd finally landed herself a jackpot, but he was slipping through her fingers. Did she snap, knowing she was about to lose everything?" Emmanuel's eyes darkened. A flicker of anger crossed his features. He set down his pen. There was a loud crash from the cafe kitchen, followed by hushed murmurs of concern from diners. Moments later, the cafe returned to its usual hum of chatter and clinking crockery. Emmanuel's voice was controlled when he finally spoke. "What is the story behind Jane Laurie?" Tim frowned, caught off guard by the question. He rifled through his memory to pull up her details. "Jane Laurie, the woman accused of killing her stepson for his inheritance. The press had hounded her relentlessly, her reputation shredded in headlines and sensational reports. When she was found hanging in her prison cell, it was widely assumed to be an admission of guilt. The coroner's report, which arrived days later, told a different story. The child had died of an undiagnosed blood disorder. Jane was innocent. But it was too late. The public had already passed its verdict. Tim exhaled. That was a tragic mistake. Emmanuel's expression didn't change. Would it be fair to say the press took her life by spreading lies to the general public? There was no way of knowing, Tim added quickly. Someone had to be blamed, and unfortunately, it fell on Jane. Mistake? Emmanuel repeated, his tone laced with quiet fury. He returned to his brief, letting the weight of the words settle. Tim, unwilling to back down, doubled down on his approach. So what's your theory then? That Rachael Brown is another Jane Laurie? That she's innocent? He leaned in. I'll write it as your version, if you don't deny or confirm it. Emmanuel looked at him again. He opened his mouth as if to respond. Then it seemed he changed his mind and returned to his papers. Tim clenched his jaw. This had turned into a battle of wills. He had started the conversation and felt victorious, certain of extracting a headline-worthy quote. Now he was losing ground. Emmanuel was an immovable force. People kill for a reason, Tim pressed. So, tell me, why did she do it? Emmanuel met his gaze and said calmly, Well, you tell me. He placed his files into his briefcase. Tim, desperate for a final jab, fired off. Why do you defend these criminals? They commit heinous crimes and you set them free on legal loopholes. Don't you care about justice, about the victims? Emmanuel turned to him, his eyes blazing. Innocent until proven guilty. Without another word, Emmanuel strode out of the café as the waiter placed Tim's order before him. Does our law condemn a man without first hearing him to find out what he has been doing? John 7:51.